You're listening to Season 2 of the griefsense podcast. I'm your host, Mimi Gonzalez, aka the Zillennial Griever. I am a creative, entrepreneur, social impact strategist, and community organizer based in Hartford, Connecticut. But most importantly, I am a griever. griefsense is really a safe space for creatives who are grievers. And I really created this space because it's something I wish I had. And sometimes you have to create the things that you wish existed. I am a serial griever where I've experienced significant loss, losing about 20 people before I turned 25 years old. And it was really hard to find community, people who looked like me in the death positive movement space. On the show, you'll mainly hear from Gen Z and millennial minoritized grievers, but you'll also have some advocates on the show who share our experience, but also want to amplify our voices and our stories. So what is griefsense? What does that even mean, right? It's not just some fancy name of a brand of the podcast. Okay, it's actually a term that I've coined to name my experience. Sometimes the words that exist in our vernacular aren't really representative of our lived experience. And so thus griefsense was born. So griefsense to me really is an inner sixth sense and intuition that's unlocked after experiencing physical loss, and it inspires purpose through creative expression, hence grievers who are creatives. So we do this in three ways. One, we embrace our mantra, which is we live life as a privilege. Two, we honor our ancestors and the legacies of our loved ones who have died. And three, we not only normalize talking about grief and death and everything in between, but we really talk about the importance of planning for our death and talking about this in community with our families. What are our death care wishes? And really normalizing that, because that is not something that we typically do in our very death phobic world. I hope that when you tuned into these episodes that you feel super comfortable. I want you to think that you are in a living room, or in Spanish we say the sala, but the grief sala. And I hope that you're able to have tea in your hand or a cafecito, so that way you're comfortable. I want you to feel like you're talking to your best friends or your primos or your cousins, people who really understand you and get it. And if you are not a griever, and if you are here to learn and listen to the stories that are shared on the show, thank you so much for being here. Your voice is important too, because guess what? If you're not a griever now, unfortunately, you will be one day. And I'm hoping that the insights that you hear on the show will help you navigate that experience. One thing I wanted to also share, y'all, griefsense is always going to be lowercase, because death, grief, all of that, it can be really scary. So these conversations is to really destigmatize death and grief, and really making sure it's like relatable, digestible, accessible. And yeah, it can be scary for sure, but let's do it together. Let's be in community together. So with that, welcome to the movement, welcome to La Familia, and welcome to griefsense. Let's dive in. Welcome back, listeners of griefsense. I am here with another episode. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited to have another special guest for you today. We have Kheyra Horton with us, and I cannot wait for you to hear everything that she has to share. And y'all, I know I say this every episode, but literally I truly feel from the bottom of my heart, like each episode just gets better and better and better, because the people that are really forming this community, and I'm just so grateful for Kheyra being here with us today. Before she comes on and introduces herself, I really wanted to say how I got in touch with Kheyra. So, and y'all know I'm always bragging about LinkedIn. It's definitely one of my favorite platforms, and I just love the quality of content and the quality of people on the platform. And so, I'm scrolling. It's a fine September day, and I see a very personal and vulnerable post that Kheyra shared. And, with all of the content on this platform, really about, oh, I got a job, or, talking about promotions and things that are really work related, it's so refreshing when creators post about their personal lives, because it's like, wow, okay, really? So we are not robots on the other side of our screens. Like, we're actually human and sharing these experiences. And once she shared her story, I knew I had to reach out and shoot my shot and see if she would be down to share her story. So I really wanted to set that stage. And of course, we'll talk about what the post was about in a little bit. But Kheyra, please come on and introduce yourself. Talk to the people.
Hey, thank you so much, Mimi. I'm super excited to be here speaking with you today. You have no idea. I absolutely love what you're doing. But my name is Kheyra Horton. Professionally, I'm a social media marketer. Started my career as an agency recruiter, actually. I spent the last 10 years within the social media marketing space. Personally, I am a daughter. I'm a mama of two, 2 years old and under. I'm a wife and a sister friend, a cousin, all of the above. So that is me in a nutshell. I would describe myself as a creative, old soul, old school at heart. But yeah, that's me.
All right. I love that. So excited that you're here. And thank you so much for sharing. And I also have to say, the reason why I was following Kheyra in the first place was because all of her amazing social media content, like y'all just need to follow her, subscribe to her newsletter, follow her on LinkedIn, because she knows what she's talking about and we can learn so much from her. The reason why we're here today is, of course, grief sense, y'all. And if y'all need a reminder of what grief sense means, that's really this sixth sense, this inner intuition that's unlocked after experiencing physical loss, and it inspires purpose. And in our world, we really inspire purpose through creative expression, right? And Kheyra is a fellow creative, and I'm just honored to have her here today. So, Kheyra, please tell us, who are we honoring today? Who are we calling into our space today? And then we'll, dive in with the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I love this prompt. There are quite a few people that I've lost in my life. My two grandparents on my father's side, grandparents on my mother's side. I think the ones that have really hit deep are the ones that I want to bring up today that really shifted the way that I view life. So that would be my grandma on my mother's side, Jordan Ali Howni. And, most recently, I've lost my uncle Wayne, my mother's brother. My mom was actually number 7 of 8 children, and that was her first time ever losing a sibling was last month. So those are the 3 people that I want to kind of put forth today for this episode, but also sharing love and all the beautiful family members that I've lost. There's no greater, no lesser.
Yes. Wow. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And, the reason I love to start with this question is after we lose someone, you go to the funerals and you have the support of your friends and your family. But then, like, after the funeral is done or after the memorial service is done, give it like 2-3 weeks, nobody's nowhere to be found, and it's almost like these people died and our world stops and the whole world keeps spinning, and it's like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to keep going when literally the whole world, like, it just, nothing makes sense, and I've made it a practice, because this is something I wish something did for me growing up, was like, ask me the names, ask me the stories of the people who have died, because they deserve for their legacies to, like, their legacies are already going to carry on with us regardless, but it really hits different when someone cares enough to want to know their names and their stories. And so thank you so much for sharing their names, and I'm honored to celebrate them and honor them with you today and always. And of course, learn more about their impact on your life and their stories. So, with that, as little or as much as you want to share regarding your grief story, would you be willing to share with the Grief Sense Familia about your grief story?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, like I was telling Mimi before we jumped in here, I have not prepared this at all. So, y'all, if I start rambling, that's why. Um, just a little bit of a warning there for this brief story. I do want to lean into the 2 brief stories that really hit me the hardest. The first one being my grandmother on my mother's side. I would say that hit me because that was the first death where I was old enough to know what was going on. And I was there when she passed. So that really had a big impact on me. And then I'll jump into my brother Jordan's his passing affected me and impacted my life. So starting out with my grandmother, man, I can say so much about this, but I feel like, I've always been such an old soul. Everyone who used to go to school with me in middle school and then high school, they'd be like, "Oh, you're such a grandma. You just a grandma." Like I came out the womb being a grandma. A lot of my personality traits, a lot of my essence is a lot like my grandma on my mother's side. When I was 6 years old, my grandfather passed, and I lived in a very small town called Sedalia, Missouri, and my grandparents were never too far away. I mean, my grandpa used to take me to preschool in the mornings, stop by Burger King and get us some sandwiches, but that's kind of how close we were. So when I was 6 years old, my grandfather passed, and I remember that day like it was yesterday. My father was taking us to the swimming pool, had our swimsuits on, me and my two brothers, and we're just like, okay, well, we passed the swimming pool. Why are we not getting out to go to the pool? And there was just an emergency. I remember how crazy that day was. And long story short, my grandfather on my mom's side passed away that day. And like I said, I was too young to really know what was going on. So they kind of kept certain aspects of that death from me, kind of to protect me, because I wasn't old enough to understand. But after he passed away, my grandmother, to put things into context for you, she had never been alone a day in her life. I mean, she had her first kid at like 15, 16, I think. She'd been married to my grandpa since she was a teenager. It was just like, okay, I got to sleep alone at home tonight. Nobody really talks about that. It's like, I'm coming back to this empty bed. I'm just imagining, what that could have been like now that I'm married. And it doesn't really matter how old you are. It's still such a hard hit that nobody really talks about that first night of being alone after never sleeping alone a day in your life. Wow. Me and my brothers started spending a lot of time over there. We went over there often, but after my grandfather passed, we spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house. And because my parents worked nights, me and my brothers would actually then start spending the night with my grandma because she was home, and it just made sense so that, us little kids wouldn't be home alone. We weren't even 12 years old yet. So we all kind of slept over there at my grandma's house. And eventually we got older. And when we were old enough to move, kind of stay back at home at our parents' address, I was just so comfortable at grandma's. I was like, I'm having a ball over here. Like, I want to stay with grandma, They're like, well, you're old enough to stay here now. You don't need to stay over there. Like, you're old enough to sleep here now. And I was just like, no, I want to stay with grandma because nothing really matched that. It was like, I want to make this clear. It's like, there was no split in my family. There was no, literally I was staying over there because my parents worked nights, but I was always at my parents' house too. It was like, I had two homes. I had two houses. I had two rooms. So, just to kind of put the context out there. But I really wanted to stay with grandma because it was like, she was making chocolate chip cookies for me and she baked me cakes. And I'm like, this is life. I got to watch the TV, whatever I wanted. Like, nobody was there when I was at my house, my brothers were there. I'm like, it's not adding up. So
What about your grandma?
I don't know, chill with grandma. Like, she was just so dope. She was so cool. We watched, she'd be like, I'm gonna watch my soaps. And I'm like, okay, all my children and all that stuff, all her judge shows. LOL. But see, that kind of poured into my, my old soul. I'm like, okay, they going crazy on the judge shows today. But
no, it reminds me because my grandma, she used to, in Spanish, she would walk caso cerrado. It was like case closed. That was her favorite, and she would be like all up in the TV, like,
They'd be in it. They'd be like, what? Oh my goodness. So yeah, I was invested. I was like, leave me here, please. But obviously I went home to my house every day also. So that's just kind of like how we were. So I got older and older, and eventually when I got old enough to drive, I was sharing like my brother's car, my oldest brother's car. We had his hand-me-down car. But I was like, man, grandma, you got this Buick here. Maybe I should just ride the Buick, I was riding in that Buick to high school. It was perfect until one day it just stopped at a stop sign because the gas meter, whatever you call it. Don't come for me, y'all.
Mm.
It was like going up and down and up and down. I was like, well, do I have gas or do I not have gas? Do I have gas? Do I not have gas? And I guess I didn't have gas because it stopped. And actually, I was on my way to the hospital to visit her after she had gone downhill. But we laughed about that once I got to the hospital.
It's the Buick for me though. Why is that always so on brand for our grandparents? Like I just don't understand. Like what about it is about the Buick?
We need to bring Buicks back. 2024, bring the Buick back. Put the Buick back on top with that. It was something about that booth seat. That one, there was no separation. It was like, I can sit here, I can lay down. It's all connected. It was beautiful. So, but the Buick gave out on me. It lied to me with the gas. Yeah. So, but anyway, so just kind of like telling you how close me and my grandma were. She got to a point where she started calling me Rumi. So I'm like, oh, she's like in her 70s and, I'm her granddaughter. And eventually she picked it up. I was like, when I finally got her to call me Rumi, I was like, oh, I won. My grandma's calling me Rumi. That's top tier. So, she was just amazing. And, I guess what I would say is, she started going downhill when I was in high school, and she had always dealt like I would say probably not always, but when I was coming up, she had lung breathing problems, and so eventually she had to go on oxygen, and so she was just such a woman of great dignity. I remember when she wanted to go to church and she hadn't been in a while. I'm like, Grandma, where are you not going? And she was like, well, I don't, it was like something about her. She really didn't want to be seen carrying, lugging that oxygen around. It just didn't feel like herself, like, such a shift in her life. Yeah. And I was like, well, Grandma, I don't know what I said, but we, kind of pep talked her, like they want to see you, like this oxygen is nothing. Like, we just glad you're here. You moving, you shaking, girl, And so when she got that, like, she had little oxygen tanks that she had bigger ones. And then there was one that you like to put in like a little bag. It almost looked like a laptop bag. So I would get those ready for her, like I would do all her oxygen and stuff, make sure my girl was good, and she would go out. So by the time she started, going back out again after she had the oxygen, she was good. She was like, take me to the grocery store. I want to go here. I want to go there. We'd be riding in that Buick. And I'm like, where do you need to go? So long story short, that was my girl. So she was doing really well after she had gotten the oxygen. But then eventually there just something that had happened. So we were really getting close to her 80th birthday. And before her 80th birthday, she really went downhill. And just to kind of give you some context, like I kind of, in my mind, like I kind of became her caregiver in a sense. So I was in high school, but, I was a top tier student. I never really missed class, never missed a day, got A's and maybe one B. And I was missing class because I was trying to help my grandmother, and my teachers were so dope. They were just like, we understand, we know what's going on. I think that was one of the benefits of living in a small town, and they were really flexible with me. And I remember that to this day. And, so, I wanted to be there for her because she had been there for me since I was a baby. Like, she was there. So for me to be able to care for her in a way that a caregiver would for that, last part of her life, it was an honor for me. I was 17, but it was like, I can do this to help her. Like, absolutely. There's no question in my mind. So for me, it was that last thing that I was like, I'll do this for you, Yeah. I'll just quickly tell you her story of her passing, which is from a movie. When I tell you, I don't know how many weeks it wasn't too many weeks, but when it happened, it kind of started happening quick. And so I would go directly to the hospital after school, and eventually I started staying at the hospital. And the nurses and everybody, I just remember them saying, well, you're not supposed to be here past this time, or you're not supposed to be staying here, to me and my mother. But they would just let us. They would let us. And I remember when she really started going down, we were, I guess my mother and her siblings were talking about coming back home. So how it happened was she had 8 kids and they came in 2 by 2. So it was like Noah's Ark almost. It was like 2 kids because there was already 2 because my mom was living in the town and my aunt was already living in the town. And then the next 2 came, and then the next 2 came. When I tell you my grandma held out, she held out. I know she did. Because at the very, very end, she wasn't like really speaking at all. And but I know she was holding out for all of her babies. And when that last set of 2 kids came through, I'm sure they said whatever they needed to say. But I believe in my heart of hearts, she waited for all of them to be able to say goodbye to her. Because shortly after the last 2 came, I remember it was me, my oldest brother, Jordan, and my middle brother, Morgan. We were in the hospital and all my mom's siblings went over to grandma's house to have the meeting, of like, okay, this is going to be happening really soon. We're all here. We need to have an important conversation. Like, what are we going to do? So as they were having that meeting, I just remember like hearing her breath change. And I was calling for the nurse and I was saying, y'all need to come and check on her because she's having trouble breathing. There's like a gargling or something like that. Y'all need to maybe suction something out because she can't breathe. And I just remember the nurse say, that's not something that we can do. That sound you're hearing is the sound. It was like she was saying the sound of death. She didn't tell me that because I was 17 and my parents weren't there at the time, but she said, if I were you, I would call your mom and let them know that they need to come and see her now if they want to see her. So my brother Jordan called my mom, who was with all of her siblings at the house, and they all came back to the hospital at night. And the room filled up. It was a very small room, as I'm sure you can imagine. The room filled up with all 8 of them. And it was me already with my 2 siblings. And something came over that room where my mother said, I feel I need to pray. Everybody join hands. I need to say a prayer. Everybody join hands. I need to pray. And like, my mom is religious woman, spiritual, godly. I never heard her say that with such authority, like, y'all need to stand around, grab hands. I need to pray. And it was that, like, it was just like everybody just grab hands. And I remember even the order. That's how much I remember from this day, Mimi. It was my grandma was laying in her hospital bed and everybody just was squeezed around that hospital bed. And it was my grandma. Then my mom grabbed her hand and I grabbed my mom's hand and my Aunt Sharon grabbed my hand. I don't really know who else's hands were grabbing after that, but I just remember, who was holding my hand. And my mom said this otherworldly prayer, like nothing I've ever heard before. It was almost like it wasn't from her.
Wow.
And the authority in her voice was chilling. And in the middle of that prayer, I just remember my Aunt Sharon on this side, the other side of me, saying, she's gone, she's gone. And to hear the moaning, the grief, the instant grief. And so I opened my eyes and I too saw that that's what the system said. And I looked and I knew immediately that she was. And I closed my eyes back and I just remember feeling that I cannot explain. My mother did not stop. You could hear the sniffles, you could hear the moaning of grief, and the room was just, there was a shift, like a supernatural shift in the room. But I remember I was still holding my mother's hand so tightly, and my mom was still holding my grandma's hand. And when she finished that prayer and everybody opened their eyes, it was just like we knew. And I can't remember, was it one of my uncles or one of my aunts, they said, Carla, you prayed her into heaven.
Wow.
And that was my first, like I said, I've experienced death, but not in that way. That was the most, the
Wow.
biggest death experience at that time for me. I never had anything like that. And when I say it was like it was out of a movie, I remember it so clearly, even now.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, just supernatural. And I would say, I know that was a lot of story.
No, that was, I just want to say, like, I mean, you're just a natural born storyteller. I mean, it makes sense why you're in a career that you're in. But, I thank you so much for saying that, because I feel like other people who might not experience loss or has not experienced that much loss yet, like, they might be resistant to hearing someone set the stage of it. But I feel like people who are grievers are really going to appreciate that, because, like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, because when you were talking about it, I felt like I was in the room with you, and like I was in that room many times with losses in my family. So that was so like, obviously it's hard to hear, but it's also super comforting to hear that, I'm not alone, and that we're not alone, and that we have experienced such strong, powerful moments like this. And when you were talking about the supernatural shift, I can't tell you how many times I felt that, but it's different for each person, and that if you can really feel the energy of your grandmother and the woman that she is, and yeah, just thank you for sharing all of that. I'm really grateful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, that was that. I think it was sad, but when I tell you, it was just so beautiful. And I looked at my mom, we were just like, where did that come from? She said, I don't know.
Wow.
My mom was like, I don't know what I just said or did, or like,
Wow.
I'm like,
Yeah.
a script out of a movie. Like, I don't, it's so sad that people pass, but
Yeah.
for her to have all 8 of her children in that room,
Bless it.
holding hands and praying her into a new dimension in that way,
Yeah.
is just powerful. I can't speak with words. I just thought about this the other day. I So around that time, I was in this like organization, like a marketing organization. I didn't even really know what marketing was at that time, but some of my friends convinced me to get into this organization called DECA, and we had actually made it to like nationals. And so we were going to all, small little Missouri girl going to um, nationals that was taking place in California.
No.
And I'd already had that trip planned, and I kept saying, Grandma, I'm not going on that trip. I'm gonna be here with you. I'm not leaving you. And she'd be saying, Girl, you going on that trip? I said, Grandma, no, I'm not. They're gonna have to drag me out. I'm not leaving you here like this. No way. And she
Yeah.
said, Girl,
Wow.
we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Mm.
And she just always just kept saying, We'll cross that bridge when we get there. What does it look like you skipping out on that opportunity?
Mm.
And, there were no other Black girls in my school that was going on that trip, just to be quite frank. But,
Yeah.
it was such a great opportunity for a small town girl to be introduced to something. Now I know it was just like the world of marketing, but I didn't know much about that.
I mean,
And,
yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
yeah, and you see kind of how that works. I just thought about that. I completely honestly forgot about that entire organization. But I just remember that was a big part of some of my last conversations with my grandma. She was always saying, you going on that trip? I said, no, I'm not. She said, you going? I said, no, I'm not. And she said, okay, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And she passed right before that trip. And I said, well, shoot, now. My mom was like, you better go on that trip. You're going
You
on
better
that trip.
go
I'm like,
now.
okay, mom. Okay,
She go
mom.
she gonna haunt you in the shower if you don't go on that
My
trip.
mom was like, you better not. Your grandma said, go on that trip. I said, oh, okay, okay. So
Yeah.
I ended up going, but everybody was just so compassionate, even on my teachers. And I just remember the compassion,
Wow.
like the compassion, and even some of the nurses' names. And I was just so hurt, but also encouraged. I
Mm.
was also encouraged because it was like she was on her deathbed. I'll say she was on her deathbed, and me and my mom would just be in there, and we weren't on like cell phones and stuff like that. We were just present. And
Yes.
she would be telling stories. I'm like, what is she telling me right now? And my mom would be like, now, Mama, you never told me that before. And she's like, well, I'm telling him now. So we just learned so many things.
Yes.
So many beautiful things, so many surprising things.
All the tea. Listen, I hear that when my grandfather, he was in hospice for 6 months in 2020. And
Mhm.
like during that time, we have so many parallels in our stories, girl. It's wild. But like I was also one of his like caregivers, and my best friend was my best friend. So like,
Mhm.
you know how you and your grandma had roomie? Well, his was young man and I was old lady. Because he's like, because at that time I was like 23, turning 24. He's like, how are you 24? You act like you like 70 years old. He would
Look,
always tell me that. And I was like, and you always acting like you 21 still. So what's up? And then literally he was 81 when he died, but he told everyone he was 39. Literally for the last day. The nurses, the doctors, he was 39. In his brain, he was forever 39. I don't know. That was
that
just
is so funny. He's not talking back,
so
I can tell.
yep, Lenny. Yep, Lenny, oh Lenny. But it's just it reminds me a lot of that because like during that time, I feel like when someone's facing the end of their life or they're getting ready to like make that transition, they don't care. They're like, well, I'm gonna
Mm-mm.
die anyway, so I'm gonna tell you this, I'm gonna tell you that, and it doesn't matter. Do with that with what you may, but here it is.
Girl, I was 17. I was like, what do I do with this information? Like, the filter comes off. The filter is all the way off. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
But
Yep. So how would you say that, after that experience, because you were 17, so from the passing of your grandmother at that time, like how did that really shape your 20s and things, how you approached your life, career, relationships, like because you mentioned that that experience really taught you to be present because you were so undeniably present, with you and your mom and you were in the room with your grandmother. So how would you say that kind of informed going forward after she passed?
um I will say this, like when she died, because I was living with her, like all my stuff was over there. But I'm sleeping over there, especially now because, I'm taking care of her. The interesting thing about the timing is because here's another story that ties into that about timing.
Mm.
She passed her 80th birthday. Like I told you, we were preparing for her 80th birthday party. Her 80th birthday was on May 2nd.
Mm.
She passed away in April. So
Wow.
she was 79. She died on Good Friday. I will never forget. She died on Good
Wow.
Friday. And I still have her, like my uncles and stuff, they made pins that said happy 80th birthday. I'm a Jean Kitchen. This is not the pin, but I have it. They were white pins with blue because she loved the color blue. And those pins, they say happy 80th birthday. And I still keep those, but she didn't make it to her 80th birthday, but it's real close.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm saving these pins. But I
Yes.
will say that because I will say the transition of her passing, we had a lot of conversations because my birthday was in May too. So her birthday was in May 2nd. My
Mm.
birthday is May 22nd. So I was
Oh wow.
turning 18. I was going to turn 18. And I was also graduating in May. So
Mm.
graduated from high school
Wow.
in May. So there were a lot of transitions happening at the same time. And I would say, Grandma, what you gonna do when I go to college? Like, I don't know what's gonna happen here. Like even my mom and her siblings, they would talk about like, what are we going to do after May? I mean, after Kheyra, goes to college, because at this point she would have needed, some kind of someone to be in there. Well, I will say she was in her right mind all the way through.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
but just in terms of like support, she would have needed there would have been, had to have been some kind of support there with her. And I would always say, what are we going to do? And she would still, yes, say, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So she was right. She just didn't make that 80th birthday. My birthday was May 22nd. And then I went off that summer to start, get onto campus before my freshman year started in August.
Mm.
So I would say that transition, I don't know if there was something about that timing, right? It was like she passed away. I was concerned about what she was going to do when I went off to college, but she
Mm,
passed away right before I went off to college. So my whole life changed, but it was like, okay, this is a new beginning completely for me.
mm,
Like, I think she was really preparing me for that transition in my life, that bigger transition of,
yeah.
going off, going away, starting a new life, you know,
Wow.
and really starting fresh. But I
Wow.
will say she just gave me so much. She really, caused me to have that confidence and believe in myself, believe my intuition. Like
Mm,
it's like,
mm,
right, do right. We taught you right. We all, because I had a community. When they say it takes a village, I had a village. Um,
wow.
so it was almost like her guidance on her deathbed just really lit that fire in me to go off and be everything that she knew I could be.
Wow. And there's something you mentioned too about like new beginnings, right? New beginnings. And that's just like ringing in my head right now as you said that, because until you experience loss, it's like you obviously we don't know how that's going to impact us, right? But then it's like the whole aspect of you having to imagine what life is going to be like without this person, like you almost become a completely different person. It's like a whole new
Mhm.
reality that you have to navigate. And I can only imagine at that time, like you're graduating high school, you lost a super important person in your life, your birthday, getting ready for college. I mean, that's so much change in such a short amount of time. And often that's honestly what loss is like. There's so many transitions happening at once. It's like, how am I supposed to make sense of this? And I'm hearing your story. I love that you were able to have so much special quality time with her to help you on that transition. That's so beautiful. Seriously. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. You also did mention, Jordan, the loss of your brother. Did you want to talk about that a little bit um, and how, yeah, I mean, because that one's more recent, right? You said.
Mhm. Yeah, so my brother Jordan, I mean, it feels like yesterday, although it was not.
Mm,
I think
mm-hmm.
it will, no matter how old I get, I think it will always feel like yesterday.
Yep.
Um, but he passed November of 2018. Um, suddenly,
Mm,
unexpectedly, a huge hit to the gut. He was 31 years old. I was 27.
wow.
And again, for me, I was in a transitional period as well. I will tell you a little bit, before he passed away. I think it was in August. Me and my husband went out to Houston and he picked us up and we had
Is that where he
spent
was living?
time.
Was in Houston?
Yeah, yeah. So he was living in Sugar Land, Texas at the time, but we flew into Houston.
Mm-hmm.
So in August, I'll tell you how this works, just how interesting this is, right? It's like we're all adults, and I think when you're young adults, it's like you said, you always think you're going to have more time, And so I have a girlfriend. She's also in Houston, and she was having a baby, and um, we went to high school together, so my whole entire family knows her. We know her mother, her grandmother, and my grandmother were friends. And she said, Kheyra, I'm planning a baby shower. Are you able to come down here for the baby shower? And I'm like, I was working a lot, but I'm like, you know what? I gotta make time. I gotta go down there for this baby shower. So I was working at an advertising agency at that time in Kansas City, and I was able to take the days off that I needed. And I told my husband, and I was like, okay, we got the tickets, where everything is set. We are going to Houston for her baby shower. And so I let my brother know that we were going to be down there, and he had planned some things as well. So closer to time, like closer to the time when the baby shower was going to happen, she called me. She said, I'm going to have the baby shower earlier than expected. And
Wow.
she said, I know you already got your tickets and everything. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to make it. But, just letting you know, I had to switch things up. And so I thought about it. And I don't know, something just said, well, still go anyway. Like your brother's down there. Just make it, a special time to spend more quality time with him and his wife at the time. And so that was really interesting because I think I was working so hard. I'm not saying I wouldn't have gone down there, but also it's like, there was a reason for me to go down there when I did that summer. And that reason left. And it was like, well, let me just still go and spend time with my brother. To give you some context, that summer of 2018, my parents also went down to Houston and spent time with him. My other brother, Morgan, he went down to Houston to spend time with him. And at the end of the summer, me and my husband, Emmanuel, we went down to Houston, got down there and spent time with him and his wife. And we stayed there. It's always a good time, right? It's like, we're a lot alike. I don't know, siblings, they're like, it's crazy how the similarities work, but we have a lot in common. Like, I don't think I really saw it when I was growing up, but so many similarities with me and Jordan. So we're down there, we're having a good time. We're watching movies, we're cracking up, we're telling stories. Like, it's just a really good time. And we enjoyed our entire stay with them. His in-laws took us all to dinner and, that whole night. It was just a really enjoyable time. And I just remember him saying like, how happy he was that everybody got to see him that summer. Like, how crazy was that? It was like, I can't believe that all of you all got to come to see me this summer, down in Houston or down in Texas. And he just talked about how happy he was to see everybody, that summer. And he showed me some of his artwork. I'm like, you painting now? Like, that's pretty legit. We grew up in a really creative household, not gonna lie, like super creative, but he had just recently picked up the painting thing. And I'm like, this is legit. Like, this is really good. So he was showing me his artwork, I would say some of the things that we have in common is like music for sure. Like, we both are singers, vocalists. Looking back, I kind of like followed his path in a lot of ways. Like, Jordan played the trumpet, then Morgan played the saxophone. I was gonna play the piano, but then I was somewhere and they were like, I don't know if I was at church or somewhere, and they were like, well, how about Jordan and Morgan, how about y'all bring your instruments and show us how you play? And I was like, well, I can play something too. It must not have been church because there's always a piano. And they were like, well, you can't bring a piano here. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I was like, shoot, I gotta play an instrument that I could take with me to prove to people that I can play this instrument. So I switched to clarinet just so I could, have something I could actually play anywhere. Cause I'm a kid. I can't carry a piano. Looking back, I wish I would have kept with the piano, obviously, but, he really kind of guided us through as the older sibling. Just in terms of his like wisdom and his character from just such a young age. Like, he was always, and now I talk to my mom now and she's like, when you were born, he was just so caring, just almost like nurturing, like, this is my little sister. He's always been that way, I never had a bad conversation with my brother, never had a bad day with my brother. That's just the kind of person he was all around everybody. So I'm getting a little bit off track here, but long story short, we had a lot of comedy. We kind of talked about some of those things. And I just remember how happy he was that everybody visited him, that summer specifically. And so, I told him that I was gonna be moving to Los Angeles. And he was like, you're gonna be moving to Los Angeles? And I'm like, yeah, but I haven't told mom yet. So you cannot tell anybody. Cause he and my mom were like, thick as thieves, like, that is her carbon copy. Like, I'm more my dad's carbon copy, but like, Jordan is my mom all the way. I was like, now, Jordan, you can't tell mom yet because I don't have, the plan situated. She's gonna be asking me questions I can't answer. And I know you tell her everything. He's like, okay, I promise you I'm not gonna tell her. I promise you I'm not gonna tell her. And so I was talking to him about, some of my interviews and stuff that I had lined up in Los Angeles. And so he was like, all right, I can't wait for you to tell me when you made it to Los Angeles. So that's kind of the stuff that we talked about in August. So fast forward, it's October now, 2018. And that's when me and my husband, we just dropped everything. It's like like those quantum leaps that people talk about. It's like, okay, I feel like a ship, like I need to be in Los Angeles right now. More opportunities, like this is just where I'm being called right now. So we're leaving. We don't have nothing set up other than I had like 2 interviews lined up, and that was it. Like I had no money. I was like, we're spending all our money to just take that drive all the way across the country. And the last of our money, like we put it down on our apartment. Obviously, you have to like pay double just to lock it in for, a box. Too much money for a box in Los Angeles, but that's another story. We took the leap. We moved to Los Angeles. When I tell you, like, we sold everything in a week, and whatever we couldn't sell, we just gave away. I knew that that was what we were being called to. And so we put everything that we could in our car, and we drove all the way to Los Angeles in October of 2018. I had 2 interviews set up. So I think like maybe it was the second day that we were there. We still didn't even have a mattress yet. But the second day that we were there, I went to this interview, and it was at a creative, like a staffing agency, but they staffed for marketing and social media, like creative jobs in Los Angeles downtown. So I went there and I was like, I do social media marketing, but I've also been a recruiter. So I mean, if y'all need somebody right now, I know what, I was like, really talked my way in there. I was like, I know all the tools. I know everything you'd be looking for. Like I've done it, but I can also recruit, so I can start immediately. So before I left, they were like, we're going to have you're going to start the job. So I got the job, and I was like, oh my goodness, thank God. So this was October. I took a picture of my view. I was just so happy, and I just couldn't believe that had happened. Long story short, November 5th, I hadn't even been there a month. I was coming back from my lunch break, and I usually have my phone on silent. For some reason, this day I was dropping my bag off, sitting it at my desk. I put my phone, it was still on silent, but for some reason I had my phone out and I had it facing up. And so before I sat down, I looked over at the phone lighting up on my desk, and I was like, it's my mom. I was like, I'm at work. She knows I'm at work. So, I was gonna say I'll call her back. But then in that moment, I'm like, she knows I'm at work. So maybe I need to pick up, but she knows I'm at work, So my mom called, and I just remember picking up the phone, and she said, are you sitting down? And I said, no. And she said, well, you might need to sit down. And so I was at the desk. I'm like, what's going on? And she said, your brother took his life today. In that way. And when I tell you, it was just such a shock. It was, I never let out such a sound that echoed through the whole floor. And when I say it echoed. That is a day that I will never forget. I was so shocked that the only other thing I can remember is my father crying in the background. But my mother, God bless her, God bless both my parents, but my mother, it was just, she was so sound of mind. I couldn't believe it. She was just like, this is it. This is what's going on. Call me back when you gather yourself, leave work and call me back. And so I just remember everybody looking at me like, what's going on? It was just like an office full of ladies. What's going on? What's going on? Everybody was just so shocked that I couldn't make any words come out. It was just sound. I can't explain it. And I went out to like this area, like a big empty hallway. And I just remember I cried. It wasn't even a cry. It was just a moan of just pain. And that's what I remember from that day. And then I went back to go get my things. And I was like, well, my husband's at work too. So he was driving. And luckily he was like in the area. So I can't remember, it was like Uber or one of those things. And so I couldn't speak. So not my boss, but somebody else, like a boss on another team. She took my phone. She said, come in this room. We're going to call your husband. We're going to have him come pick you up. You don't have to speak. I'll do the speaking for you. And that's exactly what she did. I was so glad that she did that, because maybe when I tell you I couldn't speak any words, the words, there were no words. And
Wow.
that is how I remember that day. I will say, when I was in Texas, he had expressed to me that he had been struggling with what I now know as high functioning depression and anxiety. I didn't have that verbiage then, but he's like, I was feeling this way, but I actually went to see a therapist, and he was telling me about his experience with a therapist, very positive and things like that. And he was like, I this is really, I never really thought that something like that could help me, because I was feeling this way, and now I'm so much better. And he was just like, I think, everybody should kind of explore options, especially like, when you're dealing with things and struggling with things. And I was like, oh wow, we kind of had that conversation, but it was like, in the way, this is the way that he was the type, don't worry about me, I'm fine. Like, he was just, he was that person. Like, I feel like he would never want to be a burden, like he was uplifting everybody. He was kind of everybody's saving grace. Like, and I think, when he was talking to me, it was just like, it's the way that he phrased it. It was a hurdle that he had gotten over, and he was sharing that with me. It was like that I'm doing this now, and I'm just really excited about finding this solution. And I just want to tell you, like, how great I feel now that I'm learning about like what it is that I was dealing with, because I didn't have any words for it. And
how would you have known that he was in this space? Especially like you have the physical barrier of them being in another state, so that makes it tough to see the signs and to, you know.
absolutely. And I think there are a lot of different dynamics at play, right? It's like, I don't want to talk too much. And that's why I was I didn't want to come on the podcast and be the voice of suicide, the voice of the all knowing. Like, I'm not that. Like, when I tell you there's so many questions, there are so many unknowns. I don't know. I lost a brother to suicide. I can say that I wasn't able to say that S word for I don't know how many years after he passed away. Well, I can say that I lost my brother to suicide and high functioning anxiety and depression. But I don't know what I don't know. We don't have all the answers. And I think the thing with someone passing away, like in that way, is that the questions, come up. The blame can come up. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas can arise. And I think I'm just so grateful. And I say this with the most understanding and humble heart. When he passed, and after I got over the initial pain and grief, which I'll never be fully over it, but after I was able to process what had happened, my mind almost started going into that place, like, shoulda, coulda, what did I not? But and it was almost like there was just something came over me. It said, don't go down that path. Stop those thoughts right now. Don't go down that path. And I feel like that was a comfort of my brother, or that's kind of just what I feel like. It was like, it's bigger than me. It's not something, like I said, we never had a bad conversation. And when I tell you this, Jordan was just the most amazing person you would want to meet. But I know that for a fact, a lot of times when people pass away like that, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of guilt. And I think what I'll say is that, like, I almost went down that road, but it was just like, I don't know if it was his presence. It was like, no. You're not going to carry that. That's not yours to carry. And immediately when I felt that, when I tell you, Mimi, I haven't felt like it just lifted something off me. I'm like, okay, I will not go down that road. I will
It's
not
like Big Brother
allow,
kind of trying to protect you. That's kind of how it sounds like, you
like
know, like
from the other side. That's kind of like, I
yeah,
know I don't want
yeah,
to get too deep, but that's what it felt like. And
yeah.
I will never, and I still have to this day, I will never go down that road
It's
because,
powerful.
even in his death, like he's my big bro. Like
Yeah,
there's nothing but love. There's nothing but
it's
respect for
true.
this man. Like he's always been a rock for me, for my other brother, like
Yeah,
just incredible. The kind of son that your parents would want to be the oldest child. It's like
um,
envision everything that an oldest child is. And I know that we kind of got into this a little bit, but like little
yep,
sibs, they
yep,
come to you. And so I think there was also a layer of when we were talking and, in our conversations, I think there is another dynamic of I'm little sis. How can I and I'm not putting words into his mouth at all. I will say this, I don't know what he was dealing with at the core. I can say for 100%, I don't know. And I will never put words in his mouth ever.
mm,
Knowing him though, I think there could also be an added element due to the dynamic of our relationship of me being always little sis.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like you say, like talk about it, but there's so many different things to consider. Um, and I think that eventually I do want to do something to bring awareness to this to on a broader scale. And I think for me, it's like I don't know what that is just yet, and I'm not going to
mm,
force something that's inauthentic. It has to come from the deepest of all truth.
yeah,
It has to be, I know for a fact this is what it is. And
yeah,
I know that I'm supposed to be doing something throughout my life to bring awareness to that, to speak to that, to elevate that conversation. But I'm not going to do it prematurely, if that makes any sense, because I think that would be
yeah.
doing a disservice to me, to him, to anybody um, dealing with these kinds of things. So, but
Well,
I will say, yeah, that his passing is one that changed my view on life completely. I am not the same.
well, I was gonna say too, to that point, I mean, I do feel like even making that decision to not go down that road. I mean, survivor's guilt is true when any loss happens,
Mm-hmm.
but specifically when someone dies by suicide or, unaliving themselves, the survivor's guilt is like really unbearable, especially like directly after. And so I I just think it's wonderful that you had that experience and you made that decisive decision. Like, I'm not going to choose that path. And I feel like you are honoring him in a really powerful way, even by protecting yourself and caring for yourself and being the sibling, the mother, the wife, the parent, the woman that you are. Because usually when loss happens, we there's like a couple paths you can take, the really dark one, or like it
Mm-hmm.
starts dark for a little bit. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna choose health, I'm gonna choose love, I'm gonna choose to take care of myself in recognition, in honor of my person that died. So I do think that you have been honoring him. It doesn't have to be this big grand gesture and stuff like that. And even you being on the show with us today, I think is so powerful. And like, I do recognize it's a lot to ask someone to talk about their experiences with grief. And I do recognize too that sometimes when people have conversations, like, one of my biggest pet peeves is like, oh, how did they die, how did they die? Like, this is not about trauma porn, this is not about having to know the ins and outs and details. This really is to normalize these conversations. And to your point
Mm-hmm.
about raising awareness, it's really just about normalizing that, hey, Kheyra has gone through this, Mimi has gone through this, y'all listening in have gone through this. Let's talk about it, because I feel like grief and death and everything in between can be so isolating.
Mm-hmm.
And like, a big mission of mine with Grief Sense is like we're not doing that anymore. We're not choosing isolation anymore. We're going to do this in community so that we can live long lives and we can honor, the people who have died in our lives. But what do we look like neglecting ourselves? We have a responsibility to still take care of ourselves, and I feel like the more we show up as ourselves and nurturing our hobbies, nurturing our self-care, nurturing our communities, like that is one of the biggest ways we can honor the people who have died. Seriously. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. I think, whew, that takes me back to something you said earlier about people who've
yeah.
lost people and how the world just keeps going. I think that was
Mm,
one of the hardest things, right? And obviously he died at the very end of 2018. I had just moved to Los Angeles.
mm,
I couldn't, it's like I wanted to just lay down and sink into the ground. I just wanted to lay and sink into the ground, me. But
yeah,
then I
I
couldn't
feel it.
because the rent still goes, the car note still goes, everything still, it's just like the world keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And it's like you want to say, I just lost my brother to suicide.
Right.
Can y'all slow down for a
Can
bit?
y'all
And
just
it's just
stop?
like,
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah.
it's hard. It can be hard. And I think for me, when you talk about isolation, like I would have, first of all, if I would have allowed that thought that briefly crossed my mind to intrude, I would have really gone into a downward spiral. And I can say that
Yeah.
with
And
all
I would say
confidence.
even if you did, that is a normal experience, right?
Hmm.
Like there's no right or wrong way to grieve. And I really want people to acknowledge that. Like I recognize I'm not a mental health professional, even though I did study psychology and mental health and everything like that. Like, you know, but it's like normalizing that therapists are not the only ones that talk about mental health and grief. Like we all
Hmm.
need to, it's all of our responsibilities to be talking about mental health and grief. We're not experts, but we're humans. And I think normalizing grieving in community, talking about it in community, making sure we are, doing what we need to do for our mental health.
Oh
Like
yeah,
even as your brother said, getting a therapist to have that
absolutely.
conversation.
Hmm.
But it's yeah, I mean I do wonder though, so with just this kind of I think this topic of siblings was like really interesting to me. Like how would you say like after his passing, like did that shape the relationship you have with Morgan and maybe even Jordan's wife at the time? Like do you find yourself or in your relationships as a whole or how you approach work, even how you approach motherhood, like
Hmm.
how you approach the key relationships or how you spend your time in life, like how would you say your brother's passing like really affected how you show up today? Like
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. I think one of the big things that is brought to my attention is, and I'm not perfect at this yet, but it's something that I'm intentionally wanting to get better and better at, is, for a long time I was the youngest in my family. Like I was the little sis, the little cuz, like the little, to everybody. And just seeing, for me, it kind of opened the door to be empathetic to anybody and everybody, no matter how
Mm,
old they are, like no matter what role they play, um, even to my aunts and uncles and elders, and in a professional setting to bosses and, other people,
mm,
just a complete blanket of empathy,
mm,
because you never know like what somebody else is going through. They can be, the oldest child. They can be, I know people say check on your strong friends. Like there's a lot to
mm,
unpack there, and I won't do that right now. But I think for me, it's like I look at everybody like, okay, this person could be dealing with X, Y,
mm,
Z. So if that were true, how would I approach them right now in this moment?
mm.
So that kind of changed how I
Good.
approach
Yeah.
people in my personal life, but also in my professional life. Because I might be talking to a
Mm,
client who's, and it's like I take a step back and I tell myself, I go into everything saying, hey, Kayla, we don't know what
mm.
that person is dealing with. They might have just
Yeah.
lost a sibling, a sister, a father, a child, who knows?
Mm.
So
That's so
that's,
good. That's a good reminder for everyone out there.
oh, for
Yeah.
sure. So that's how that changed me in that way. I would say for my immediate family, the whole dynamic, I mean, you lose somebody in your immediate family, the whole dynamic is shifted. I mean, we had to build a new dynamic. You know, Jordan was the one to, like, he was that person. He was the caring kid. He called my parents almost every day. Like, he was that, you know, he was that one. And so it's like now I'm grieving, but also I realize that my other brother's grieving, my mom is grieving, my dad is grieving. Can we talk about it? What's too much? Can I bring this up to my father? And how do I do it? What now I'm considered about like what's too much for my parents, because I lost a brother, but they lost a son.
They lost a son. Yeah.
So I think for me, even having my daughter, it gave me even more empathy for my parents. Like just saying, okay, these are memories. They had memories of Jordan that I never saw. You know, when I was born, Jordan was always here. Jordan was around my whole life. But I mean, for them, that was their first kid. So I look at my first kid, you know, I'm being with her, changing her diaper, helping, trying to potty train her and doing all these things. Like those are moments they had. So it gives me a new perspective of life, you know, how to be gentle from that perspective and understanding that everybody's grief looks a little bit different, you know. So I'm grieving a brother, but they're grieving his own. My other brother's grieving his only brother. And so just, it makes you more mindful. And also it makes you appreciate each other even more. You know, it's like that could have split us apart, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They could have split us apart and it didn't. And I'm so thankful for the grace of God it did not. And everybody understands that like this is something that happened. We can show other people that we can get through this. You can get through this no matter what. You know, I'm where I will not lie. Like I said, I got 2 little girls. I'm trying to keep up as mama. I had a pile of clothes. I set a pile of clothes on the bed. I just washed some clothes and I was trying to find what I was going to wear for this. You know, I needed something that didn't have a milk stain on it. And the first one, I tell you, it was a whole bunch of clothes. The first shirt that came up was this shirt, Jordan Ollie Holony. This is a shirt that we made for him. Who knew so many people. He touched so many lives at the age of 31. He has 3 services, one in Texas, one in Missouri, one in New York.
Wow.
There's a music scholarship for him. And they asked me to design this logo for the music scholarship, and I did. And when I was looking for my shirt today, I was like, I'm not gonna find nothing in this big old pile of clothes. And all of a sudden this shirt I saw it laying on top, and I said, you know what? I'm wearing that because I don't believe that's a coincidence.
Wow. That literally, my hairs on my arm stood up. Wow. That's beautiful. And that's exactly like he's here. He's always here. He's here right now, you know. Wow. Well, I did want to ask you a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. But the one is, you know, in your kind of putting your like a career hat on, right? And experiencing multiple losses, right? How would you say, or like just being a creative yourself, right? You're multi-hyphenate is really what you are. You have many creative talents that you have. Do you feel that as you're navigating your career and like the impact that you had at people at work with the projects you're working on, the amazing things that you've created, like, do you feel that your losses has helped you be a better creative? Like, do you share that experience, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. For one, it's made me absolutely intentional about every decision that I make. I was just working with an agency. I've been working with them since last year, doing some amazing projects, some real cool social media stuff. And just 2 weeks ago, I had to tell them, you know, I need to step away to really be more present with my 2 little ones right now. And I just feel a shift coming on. Now, had this happened before my brother passed or whatever, everything would have been like, what? Why would you not like want to take this client? Like, you're about to work on these projects. You're about to work on this campaign. Like, everything that you have worked towards, like, is right there. And you're in love with this team. You're in love with the agency. Like, why would you not continue? And it's just like, I, I'm very aware now of my energy, of my intuition, and just being really intentional about the decisions that I make. So even if I'm not sure what's next, I'll trust the motion that says, "Hey, it's time to shift." I think I would have been a little on edge to just jump ship and kind of walk away from some really amazing opportunities before my brother's passing. But knowing how intentional I want to be, that has changed how I make decisions. And also,
Wow.
Now, obviously you work for your career, you work really hard to get to certain places and work on really cool projects and campaigns with different brands and things like that. But now that my brother's passed, I realize that the most valuable thing I have is time. And so, yes, I'm walking away from a lot of opportunities right now. In another transition. Like when we email back and forth, I was like, I am in the transitional phase, but I'm operating based off of a place where I know for me the most important thing I have is time. So how can I make that time work for me? How can I make that time work for being, with my kids, my two little ones, my husband, my parents? Because also seeing them, it's like I want to be able to spend more time with them, and my other brother who lives in New York. I want to be able to go and do, and I think Jordan passing just taught me that like there's never going to be a right time. Also, like my friend's baby shower that didn't end up being that same time, but I went anyway. It was like, that's not a coincidence either, So I think the old me would have been like, oh, I don't have time. Like I'm doing this, I'm catching up. So I would say that's really changed that for me. And I know I'm rambling off now.
No, I was gonna say that's powerful though, because it's super validating to hear you say that, because I do feel that obviously I would take back, like I wish no one died in my life, right? Like I would give anything. I would give anything to have, moments with the people who have died in my life. But I do feel that the way I show up, the way I treat people, the way I love, the way I live, the way I truly feel, and I'm getting emotional as I think about it, because I truly feel that if we live life, and I used to think, and I saw this TED Talk, I forgot the woman, it was so powerful. And she says, instead of living every day like it's your last, what if you live every day like it's your first? And that really, it really, really, really impacted me, because I feel like my whole life, like experiencing so much loss before I turned 25 years old, like I've never met anyone else that experienced that like me. Like losses here and there, like you normally heard of, like, grandparents and stuff, but like I lost 4 people to suicide in 1 year in high school. And like my dog all the same year, like my father, it's just too much loss. And it's like I always was racing against the clock.
Yeah.
Like I gotta do this before I die, because and I'm not even gonna hold you, I'm still working through that. And I am a multi-hyphenate myself, so I feels like, oh, I want to do this project, I want to do that, and I want to do this. And like that's kind of why I wasn't gonna last in corporate too long, because I like being involved in so many different things. But
I feel you.
But it's like when I heard that TED Talk, I was just like, I don't need to race against the clock anymore. My time will be my time, and I'm okay with that. And to be quite honest with you, I don't fear death. Like I don't. I really don't. What I feared was not being able to actualize all the things that I wanted to do in this lifetime, because a lot of the different things I'm working on is to honor my people. And so grief sense to me is, I think, what helped get rid of that fear altogether, because now I am doing something that's honoring my people. And so that obviously, while I don't want to die tomorrow or the next day or the next day, I feel I'm more at peace now, and I'm really living life now, or like, what do I get to do today? Like I have a new lease on life. Like it's like me and my boyfriend have this thing. We challenge each other, like whenever we hear a song, like let's act like it's the first time we're hearing it, you know?
I love that.
And like the other day I was listening to Buy You a Drink by T-Pain and I was like, damn, this song is hitting. Like it had multiple songs in one. Shot I eat. Yeah. And it's like you had to like do the snap and walk it out. Like it was so many different songs in one song. I was like, it just, you know, and like I'm trying to apply that filter in life with so many different things. Like if I go to the gas station, like and it's fun. It's just making it fun, like treating everything like it's your first time, not your last. And like it's so refreshing. So when you were saying like it was just really validating about living life with intention, because that's literally all my life has been, you know. And then I do have moments where like things aren't as, you know, you get caught up in the day to day. That's normal. We're humans. But then you have like these, when you experience loss, I feel like you have these sobering reminders that it's like, okay, we bring it back. We good now. Like, okay, it's time to be intentional. We have to really move with that care. And oh, something I did want to bring up to you too was like, since you are in the social media space and have been for a while, like, and I know we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but I think all the creatives out there listening are going to appreciate this, and I would love to get your insights on it. But like, speaking of intention, right? When we're creating content, and it's so funny for me, like I'm a content creator that focuses on grief. So what happens when my own grief gets in the way of creating content? Like it's like a mind trip for me. But lately I do notice I have these like roller coaster moments where it's like I'm really good and I'm not attaching myself to the algorithm and like how a certain post is going to perform or how a certain episode on my podcast is going to perform or whatever, just because like I know the worth and I know the value, and I just wish other people could experience it, not because I created it, but because like the stories on the show and just they're just so powerful, and I wish people can value it. But at the same time, I realize that if you get caught up in the metrics of how a freaking post is going to perform, like, are you being intentional at all? And why does it freaking matter? And something that has been a guiding light for me and for the grievers out there, I challenge you to do this as well, is if a certain post is not performing well or it flops, which is going to happen, no matter where you are, who you are, what you do, is going to flop at some point in the future. Like, challenge yourself to be like, okay, you know what? And something that's helped me is like, okay, my family, a lot of them have died. And I know this. Yes. And growing up, I didn't have a lot of images or videos or items of my people who have died. And so that's why I became a creative, a filmmaker, or whatever, just to create something that was going to outlive me. And I knew that if I was creating something that was going to outlive me, that my family would have something of me after I go. And that gives me so much peace. So whenever there's like a post and I'm like, whatever, like now I think back at that, I'm like, you know what? At least I have this post out there. And I always create with the intention of like, my family's going to have one more piece of content from me after I go. And it's going to be the biggest gift for them. So I don't know if you want to react to that.
Yeah, I love that. There are two things I will say to that. Two parts to that. The first reminds me of something that I used to bring up to my parents all the time as a kid. My father, artist, amazing artist, born in Somalia, he does any kind of, he does multiple different types of artwork. But something that he does or used to do all the time when we were growing up is take pictures. Like he always took pictures all the time. And we're like, Dad,
like, what are you
chill
doing?
with the camera. Like,
but me with my mom.
he just everything, all the time. Like, I love you, Dad, if you ever hear this, but we'd be like, why you gotta take pictures of this? But anyway, but now I love it because we go through, there's so many books. I'm talking about old school books, like 90s, turn the page, got the pictures printed out type of photograph books. And so every time I go home, I love that about going home because I get to look at those pictures. And one thing I used to always bring up to my parents is, y'all got all these pictures of Jordan. Where are my pictures? Like, where are my pictures at? Where am I in these books? Okay.
Yeah.
I would always bring that up, and they're like, they would always say, when Jordan came, he was our first kid, and then Morgan is like, we got a little tired, and then you by the third time we had the third kid, we was tired of taking pictures, and so we have books full of Jordan. Wow. And now when I go home, do you know what I love to do? Is look at those picture books full of Jordan. Before he passed, I was like, now, Mom, Dad, like, really, this is how y'all feel? But now I'm just like, wow, how, not to even go back to supernatural, but like there's something there, right? Like, we have so many things of him, so many pictures of him, so many videos of him. And when I was a kid, I'd be like, wow, we got all this footage and content of Jordan. Like VHS content, not like Instagram content, VHS content. Wow. Yeah. But now it's just like, wow, whatever led my father to do that, thank you. Whatever pushed you to do that, thank you, Dad. Because we have that now. And it's such a blessing. So like when you were saying to have something to leave, what a blessing. Like it was bigger than that moment of me being like, Dad, put the camera down, It's bigger than you. It's bigger than that moment. We have to think beyond ourselves. And so I think when you come from it from that perspective of also like, you're not chasing an algorithm. It's like, this is your legacy, Yes. What do you want to share with people? It doesn't matter about 1 like, 2 like, red like, blue like, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than you. And I think the second part of that is that made me think about how I approach, things since Jordan passed away. One thing that his passing did for me, I will say, in the most interesting way possible, is that it made me fearless. And I say that from the perspective of when my brother died, when I got that call from my mom, that was my lowest. I never felt a pain so deep, ever. I never thought I would come out of the dark. It is a dark cloud. I never thought I would come out of that cloud again, ever. And so now, still grieving in my own way. It's never going to go away. It's always going to be there, right? But for me at 27, that was the worst thing that could happen to me. I lost my brother to suicide. There's nothing, you can't tell, there's nothing worse than that. Yeah. So when I think about like, oh, you misspelled something in an email, or you messed up on a client pitch, or I lost my brother. My brother. There's nothing worse than that. Yep. So when you think about it from content, it's like, I'm gonna post this. If I get 3 likes, that's not the worst thing that can happen. I lost my brother. What's worse than that? Yes, so absolutely. It's such an interesting thing that it made me fearless in the way that, just from my perspective, that was the worst thing that could have happened to me. And it is to this, it's the worst thing that has happened to me. So I think when I'm looking at content and posting and putting myself out there, I don't care what y'all think. I lost my brother. There's nothing worse than that. Come at me, bro. Oh my gosh. Come at me, bro. Like there's nothing worse. I've been through the worst. Right. So a little like, a nasty comment, unfollow, this or that, that's little to me. Yes. And I'm putting stuff out that's gonna help you. I'm putting things out with intention. Right. That's all that matters. It's bigger than me. So that's what I would say. Be fearless. Mm-hmm. It's not the worst that could happen. You getting a few likes, you not going, catching on out. Who cares? Put it out there. Show up. Show out. Because you only have this life. Your time is limited. You can't keep waiting and looking around and also following everybody. Well, other thing I want to say when it comes to content creation, there's so many people, so many experts. I just have to hold snaps to that. There's so many experts out here. It's like you can drive yourself up a wall looking at this and hearing this tactic and this trick and this tip, and you can go crazy trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. And it's like everybody wants a secret to success, a recipe to success. It's like you looking at their recipe, they got different ingredients than you. You look at you trying to figure out how am I supposed to make this, sweet potato pie, and you got the best,
Ice cream cake.
Ice cream. I was gonna say something. I was like, let me not be stereotypical. You got mac and cheese recipe on deck. Like, look in your pantry. You got all the ingredients for mac and cheese. You steady looking over there at their sweet potato pie, trying to figure out why yours doesn't look good, as good, taste as good, because they got the ingredients for the sweet potato pie, but you were gifted the ingredients for the mac and cheese. So obviously it's not going to come out the same. It's like, focus on what's in your hands. Focus on what's in your pantry. Like, when you can do that, you're unstoppable. And that's all I got to say. Like, focus on what ingredients you already have, and you'll be unstoppable.
I love that so much. It's like everything that we create right now, everything that we do, everything that we say, every interaction, every content we post, like that, these bits and pieces are the sum of our legacy, right? That every single piece is adding up to what our legacy is. And so, yes, I think while it's important, you do want to stay trendy with the different TikTok trends and everything that's going on. But if that's all you're doing, honestly, all I'm seeing is everybody copying each other, and what legacy are they really leaving behind? Like, if you want to hop on the trends here and there, cool, that's fine, that's fun, cool. But at the same time, what are you about? What is your legacy? And like, that's been my thing lately. It's just that I see a lot of creators like copying each other, and like I do see a lot of, this year I saw it was like a report, it was like the year of the creator. Like, a lot of people, especially Gen Z, as we're coming up in the workplace right now and stuff like that, like, people really want to become full-time content creators, and I support that all the way. But when you do create the content that you create, move with intention, think about the legacy you want to leave behind. And these are really big concepts. You won't know this sometimes early on in your life. Sometimes, unfortunately, it took us like really catastrophic events in our lives to really understand the top concepts we're talking about. But I think what I'm really trying to say is, don't wait until something bad happens to create with intention. Don't wait until you lose something so important to you to see the value in showing up authentically and with integrity. And I just your legacy is all you leave behind. Our stories, that's the only thing we have left of us after we go. We can't bring clothes, we can't bring our friends and our family, we can't bring anything, our phones, none of that. When we die, that is it. Yeah. Right? Like, we can't bring anything with us. The only thing we leave behind is our stories and our legacy. So what's your story about? I want to know.
Right, me too.
So, but to wrap up here, we do have journaling is a huge aspect of grief. At least it's helped me in my journey being a creative and a griever. So the journal prompt that you selected to share with the people too, and I think a lot of people are going to resonate with it, is describe an unexpected moment of joy amidst your grief.
Sure. Yeah. So real quick, my unexpected moment of joy, I think it's a little bigger than a moment, but after Jordan died, I would say the guilt that I did feel was laughing again, was smiling again, was feeling joy. It's like, how can I feel this emotion? How dare I feel this emotion and my brother's gone? So that I would say that came up for me, but quickly subsided. And the biggest sense of joy I've gotten since my brother passed was the blessing of my daughter, Phoenix. Like, I didn't have any kids when my brother passed, and I think about that often. My daughter was born, and she has a birthday coming up on February 4th. But
my sister's birthday.
You're kidding.
Yeah. Yep.
That's crazy. We need to really talk, like talk after this.
Girl,
okay?
We friends now. We family now.
We in it for real. Yeah. So my daughter was born on that day in 2021, and it was after a really dark time, right? Like, I talked to you about how I felt with my brother, the grief. I didn't know what to do with it, and then we went into my other brother, Morgan. This brother's a long story. I don't have time to tell this story, but long story short, he had just gotten his PhD. Girl, he's very smartest. He's super smart, and he he talks in a way that like it's over my head. You know, the stuff that he knows is over my head. Um, he was in South Korea, working in a laboratory when Jordan died. And so my mom was trying to figure out, I was like, well, does Morgan know? We didn't figure out we didn't know how to get in touch with him. And so my mom was calling over to South Korea, and long story short, nobody spoke English. So it took a while for him to get the news that Jordan passed. So Morgan, after, he was supposed to be there for 2 years. He jumped on a plane and he didn't go back. He stayed with me and my husband in our little box of a studio in Los Angeles and slept on the floor in Los Angeles in our apartment. And that's kind of how we bonded after that. And so it was like a blessing in disguise. It was such a small space, a tight space. But when my other brother passed, we were all in that room and we were all pouring into each other. We just sat there in the grief together, and we didn't know what to do with it, but it was okay because like we were grieving together. We were in that small studio in Los Angeles, and then Morgan came to stay with us. And I'm so glad that he did, because he shouldn't have been alone all the way over in another country. And we were processing our grief together. But then, after that, he eventually got his own place in San Diego. Stayed in California while we were there, but now he's in New York. But then after that, COVID hit. So we were in lockdown. So here I was again in this like very tight, small studio of an apartment in Los Angeles, in Koreatown, Los Angeles. And I was just stuck with these four walls, like still grieving. Like I felt like just yesterday, it was, 2020 now, but I was so isolated. I just didn't feel like myself. It was a very dark place. And it wasn't necessarily that I had like dark thoughts, but it was just like, I just kind of wanted to disappear into the time. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't know how to get out there, And so, long story short, I ended up having my daughter, Phoenix, February 4th, 2021. I probably would not have, I guess for me, it's like, this might be a generational thing too. It's like, I kind of was like, okay, well, I'm going to have my daughter when XYZ, or when we get a house and when this happens, then I'll have a kid, because I can't really, but it was like, she was the biggest blessing to me at that time, like a God-given gift. She's kind of what I needed to come out of that space. It's like,
and her name Phoenix. I mean,
yeah,
that's not symbolic. I mean, wow.
Yeah. You can already tell, like,
Oh.
I named her Phoenix because of that reason. It was like, the meaning of a phoenix, and, rising up, life after death, new beginnings. And that's what she did for me. So her name is Phoenix Ali. My brother's name is Jordan Ali. So I wanted to make sure that he was still there with us. And that was the joy, Phoenix Ali. And I think for me, what that did, I kind of tie this back to earlier, that gave my parents a new lease on life. It's like, how do there's something about a baby that just, you don't need any words. You don't need any words. It's like, there's a joy, like this bundle of joy. How can we be like, we've got this bundle of joy? There's something so special about that. And that's something I couldn't give my parents. When I didn't know what to say to them, I didn't know how much was too much. But when I see them with Phoenix, and now I just had another baby, Cleo, when I see them, Mama. Thank you. It's like I said, she's 7 months now, but when I see my parents with their first grandchildren, that to me is joy. And that for me is joy. And I can see the joy that they have, and they constantly tell me over and over again, that their background pictures are of my kids. So when they leave my house, they're like, give me kisses, give me hugs. And I'm like, y'all not gonna give me a hug? Y'all not gonna give me a kiss? Like, okay, I see where we at now, but that's the joy. And, the life, the new beginning after death in my life. I was I thought I was wiped out. But new beginnings for sure.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think it goes to show that when you are grieving, as you mentioned, this is kind of like a journey long, lifelong experience. But even in your grief, you can experience joys. Multiple truths can coexist, right? You can be happy and sad at the same time. And that's honestly what living with grief looks like, you know? But wow, Kheyra, oh my goodness, what a story you have, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just honored to know you. I'm honored to, you my new friend. Like, I really feel like grief siblings, grief friends, they know, like,
yes.
seriously, like, we just see each other, feel each other on a whole nother level. And just thank you so much for letting us hear the stories of your grandmother and of your brother. And I know we didn't get to spend time talking about your Uncle Wayne, but also want to pay, my respects to your family and love for him as well. And
Absolutely.
I'm just grateful for you. And everyone, please let us know what you thought of this episode. Please, we'd love to comment on YouTube. Tell us, hit Kheyra up on LinkedIn. I think that's your main platform. Or just let us know, like, where can people get tapped in with you so they can continue the conversation if they like to reach out.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm hanging out on LinkedIn. You can find me just first and last name, Kheyra, Kheyra Horton on LinkedIn. If you are in social media space, if you are in the marketing space, I just launched the social media memo. So if you're looking for opportunities, get tapped in, socialmediamemo.com. I'm your girl. I will hook you up with a lot of opportunities. But yeah, I'm excited to hear what you all thought about this conversation and for you to connect with us. So thank you.
Yes. All right, everyone. Well, please don't forget to leave us a rating on wherever you consume your podcast content, especially Spotify and Apple. 5 stars, please, so we can reach as many young grievers and creatives as possible. But Kheyra, thank you again. Thank you for being here. I'm honored to know you, and I'm just so happy to have had the privilege to amplify your story. And with that, we'll catch everyone on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Griefsense Familia, that wraps up another episode of the Griefsense podcast. If this resonated with you, please feel free to share with someone who will appreciate it and tell a friend to tell a friend. Also, I'm a firm believer that feedback is a gift. So, I'm just saying, I won't be mad if you decide to leave a review and a rating of your experience on the podcast so far. Also, let's help each other find community in grief, and let's amplify these stories far and wide. Thank you for tuning in. En solidarity y con mucho amor, Mimi.